We made it through the readings. I feel the need to quiz you to make sure you were paying attention. So, who was the prophet that we heard from in our third reading tonight? No, that was the fourth reading. Isaiah, for those of you who are curious or actually feeling guilty. Okay. In all seriousness, I want to use this little coffee break between our readings and our confirmations, and I want to go back to the very beginning of our evening, because my favorite part of an Easter vigil is when we start in darkness and then bring light into the church, candle by candle. And it's a light that grows person to person and near the end fills the entire church with light. I love that. And you can be sure we are not just doing that to be dramatic and artsy. We're being a little dramatic, and we're being a little artsy. But we're also being symbolic and biblical. So, our first reading from Genesis chapter 1. God creates heaven and the earth. And the very first thing he creates is light. And I'm talking the first thing, all right? Day 1, 8 a.m., right after he clocks in, doesn't even check his voicemail. We're talking light, first thing. That is significant. And for a vigil, we reenact that timetable of salvation. The first thing we do, we bring in the light. Then we hear the history of God's people throughout the ages. And then we have our confirmation and baptism rituals where we fully bring in people into our community, not entirely unlike Jesus picking up disciples here and there. And then we're going to wrap it all up with the Eucharist, which is the salvation of us all through the death and resurrection of Christ. So this evening is in chronological order. Here's something for you to think about with respect to God and light and darkness. And again, I'm sticking to Genesis chapter 1. God creates light. But in doing so, he does not destroy darkness. The darkness is now relegated to the nighttime, and it becomes part of the good world, the world that God is the master of. And that's kind of a strange message to get from the Bible. Because think about it for a minute. We could talk about darkness as being vanquished every time it comes in contact with light. We could talk about darkness as a perpetual enemy, unworthy of trust or tolerance. We don't get that in the story. In the story, God is the master of all things, even including the nighttime. So, got a question for you, a real one this time. What exactly do you associate with darkness? When you have darkness, what else do you have? Huh? That's what I was going for. Absolutely, 100 points. I was expecting the first answer to be cold or something a little more basic, but absolutely fear. I'll throw in loneliness too. That's what we associate with darkness. Now let's see how many of you can bear to be honest in front of your fellow person. How many of us here have ever been scared of the dark at some point in their life? All right, about half of you are telling the truth. At least that's my theory. Anyway, But yeah, and this is exactly how we experience the world. All right, when we have darkness, man, I mean, it's so easy to give in to the loneliness or the fear. I mean, come on. We cheer up on sunny days. Okay? We get depressed in the winter when we go home at 5 o'clock and it's already nighttime. But the story of Genesis is telling us that even darkness is in God's domain, that God is in control even of the nighttime. So when we're sitting in the dark in the church before it starts, we're not trembling in fear. It's not that kind of darkness anymore. If anything, we're trembling in anticipation because we know something pretty cool is about to happen. And sure enough, the entire church fills with candlelight alone. And we do it because we pass on the light from person to person. It is a communal enlightening of the church. And when it comes down to it, that is what faith does. It takes the darknesses of the world, that's right, I turned darkness and made it plural, took the darknesses of the world, the pain, the loneliness, the sorrow, the grief, the fear, takes all of it and it leads us through to the light of Christ. So this here is the Paschal candle, otherwise known as the Easter candle. And for any of you that have seen a baptism by me during Mass, I have made it as clear as I can that this is a representation of Christ. Specifically, it's the representation of the enlightenment that Christ bestows upon us all. Which means that at the beginning of an Easter Vigil, okay, we're reenacting Genesis chapter 1 by bringing the light into the dark church, but we do that with the light of Christ. Christ is the light of our lives. And he has been since the very foundation of the world, because he is one with the Father and the Holy Spirit now and forever. Christ is the light of the world and the salvation of us all. And I urge you to remember that as we come together at the altar. But first, we've got some VIPs to take care of. Our confirmation candidates, they're making a huge step tonight. And it is our job to make sure that they are fully welcomed into the community as fellow children of God, as people that no longer need to wander in the darkness because the light of Christ leads each and every one of us as one community, now for all the days of our lives.